is 11:30, so let's start things up here. Thank you all for attending. This is the second of two open forums that President Standiford is conducting to get input into the strategic planning process. He's also going to start off with a few remarks about that process, where we're at, and give you a little bit of overview of the structure. Or he and Chris Jones are going to, I think, combine and tag team on that if they use the same format that we did last Thursday. I want to mention that along with the Zoom session, there is a live stream. I was afraid that we would have more participation than the Zoom could handle. That wasn't the case on last Thursday, but even so, there were a few people who actually just did the live stream. Folks on the live stream, or people who are just feeling like they would rather remain anonymous, if you want to make comments either in a private chat to me or an email or to Chris Jones, feel free to do that, and I will make sure, and we'll make sure they get before the president. And again, that's for folks that might be on the live stream, or even if you're on the Zoom session and would like to remain anonymous in your comments. Unlike last Thursday, I have a hard stop today, and I believe President Standiford does as well. Yep. And in fact, I have to leave a few minutes before 1 o'clock. And this is mostly a heads up to our tech people. Kevin Wall, I believe, is still on. He's helping us out today. So he'll hang out until actually 1 o'clock or a little bit after and shut the rest of the meeting down. We are being recorded. This is not to take attendance, but it make it easier to collect information if we miss things. Let's see. I wanted to start off with just really two remarks about the strategic planning process. This is going to be significantly different than the last time around for a number of reasons. One of the things is that it is supposed to be, or we're going to keep it more narrowly focused. We hope to come up with about 3 priorities that we're going to focus on to move forward for the next couple of years. One of the other issues we're very aware of is trying to maintain balance between the need for community involvement and the desire to not overwhelm a group of people who are already very busy. And so again, that is helped a little bit by keeping a more narrow focus. On the other hand, we want to move fairly quickly. On the other hand, moving quickly is not as important as doing this well. And so if at any time you feel like things are going too quickly, that there isn't sufficient opportunities for community involvement, feel free to email me or Chris Jones, or I'm sure President Standiford would also be available to help answer concerns. So with that said, I will turn it over to President Standiford.
Thank you, Matt. Thanks for getting us started, and thanks for all your partnership in this entire process. As Matt mentioned kind of in the opening, and I'll just kind of reinforce that if you have any questions or comments along the way, feel free to chime in at any time. One of the things that's been really strange this year is I have not had a chance to meet many of you in person, and I know that in many ways our relationship is still evolving. So if you're uncomfortable sharing with me directly, I hope you are comfortable, but if you're not, I understand. Feel free to get those messages to Matt or anonymously in the chat. I'm happy to answer any questions or hear any comments that you all may have as we go along. Before I jump into a little bit about the strategy, I also wanted to pause for just a second and say, there's a chance for me to say thank you. I don't get to see many of you in many environments. There's a chance for me to just say thank you for helping us get through what turned out to be a really, really challenging semester last semester. I've heard pretty much everybody say it was a semester unlike anything they've ever seen. And I think that's probably pretty accurate. And it was challenging in many ways, but we got through it. One of the things I thought I'd share with you is we heard at the end of the semester a lot of concerns from our students about whether they could navigate the semester successfully. You may recall there was a big push for the pass-fail option. We decided not to do that for a variety of reasons, mainly for the best, we didn't feel it was in the best interest of the students. What's interesting is when we looked at the final grades, They were actually slightly better than average, not statistically so. So really, they were just in line with what we would see most semesters. But in the end, the students did fine. And that's a compliment to our students, and that's a compliment to you all for helping them get through what was a really, really difficult semester. So thank you for that. I just wanted to say how much I appreciate all the effort I know that went into making that happen. I know we got another challenging semester ahead of us. It was interesting earlier today. I have my windows closed now because it gives weird backlight, makes my forehead look a lot bigger than I like. I had them open earlier today, and it was so exciting to see students walking on campus. I hadn't seen that in a while. I'm like, yay, they're actually like students out there. It was really awesome. We're back on campus. We're back. I had used the term face-to-face before. I can't remember who it was, and I wish I could because I want to give them credit, but somebody used the term mask to mask the other day, which I thought was inaccurate. And if you remember who said that, please let me know. I thought that was a very accurate description. But we're back, but we're not back to normal operations yet. And this is going to be another tough semester in a variety of ways. And I know that, and I recognize the tremendous amount of work associated with getting through the semester. We'll get through it. I'm confident we'll get through it because we've done this before now, but it's not going to be without a fair amount of effort. So one of the questions that I know is probably a natural question that many people have is, given the amount of work that's going on right now, I often say one of the things I miss is teaching. I got to tell you, I wouldn't want to be teaching right now. It's brutal. I know it is. And I know many of you are working extra hard to do a hybrid format and to offer the level of quality that you expected yourself and of our students. And I really appreciate that. So why would we go into this fairly engaged process right now? And so what I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about that. And then when I'm done, I'm going to turn over to Chris Jones, who's going to talk a little bit about the process itself. And I've got some notes I'm going to go through here, but the punchline is, as so many of us have seen, our market is seriously disrupted. And you can't go a single day anymore without going on the news and talking about the challenges in the industry. There are some pieces in the Chronicle today talking about the stuff going out at the University of Kansas, and the industry is just in a lot of stress right now. Now, what's interesting is a lot of that stress was happening before the pandemic. Many of us have read about and are familiar with the upcoming drop in enrollment that we're likely to see in 2024. One of the things that's kind of interesting about our industry is we can see the pipeline years in advance because they're all in high school and middle school right now. So we know when we're likely to see a demographic shift. And it was coming in 2024. And the pandemic has accelerated that in some really interesting ways. And a lot of universities are really stressed right now. And what's interesting is one of the things that I've noticed, and maybe you have as well, is that a number of schools seem to have resigned themselves to the fact that they're going to experience significant decline. And then what you're seeing is they are in the process of significantly downsizing themselves to address that. So there are a multitude of ways you could address a potential decline, and many schools have taken the path of saying, okay, we're just going to accept the fact that it's going to happen and are adjusting our organizations accordingly. I don't think we need to accept the decline as an inevitability. I think there's another way to get around this. I think we can navigate through this. One of the things, I'm actually we have a board of trustees meeting on Friday, and earlier today I was working my notes for the board meeting. And one of the things that I've just come to really appreciate is the tremendous underlying strengths that we have that have become increasingly apparent as we've navigated through the challenges we face right now. We've got some really amazing underlying strengths, tenacity being one of those that I've really observed in great measure during the pandemic. And so now what we need to do is we need to be thoughtful about how we navigate the challenging landscape by leveraging those strengths. And one of the things I want to do is I want to do that now. I think it's really important that we start now before we're forced to respond in some unhealthy ways, which will happen if we aren't thoughtful about how we deal with some of the challenges the industry is facing. So I want to begin today thinking about how we actually position ourselves to navigate the choppy waters ahead in higher education. It's interesting. One of the things that makes me optimistic about where we're at and what we can do is our DNA, if you will, and some of you heard me talk about this before. Our DNA comes from the very founding of the university. Our founder, Lydia Moss Bradley, felt a level of tragedy I hope none of us ever experience. And yet out of her tragedy was a mission, really, a drive that transformed not just Peoria, but created the institution that we are today. And what's interesting is we can look back on our mission, we can look back on who we are, and really use that as a strength for how we move through this process. In fact, as part of our preparation for thinking about the strategy, one of the things I did is I went back to our mission. I'm looking at my notes because I want to make sure I get this exactly right. This is our stated mission as it is stated today on the website. Bradley University empowers students for immediate and sustained success in their personal and professional endeavors by combining professional preparation, liberal arts and sciences, and co-curricular experiences. Alongside our dedication to students, we embrace the generation, application, and interpretation of knowledge. And what's interesting is that mission is as true today as it was in the very founding. One of the things I was able to do a little bit over the break is to go back and do some reading about the very founding of the university, a little bit about the history of Lydia Moss Bradley. And what I really love about our mission statement is it perfectly aligns with the founding mission of the university. One of the questions I've gotten throughout this process is, are we going to change mission? And the punchline on that is absolutely not. The mission is solid. It is what it is today, and it's very consistent with our founding. What will change and what we'll be looking at in the strategic process is how do we execute on that mission given today's environment? And that's really what this strategy is all about. How do we rethink what we do? And again, to avoid becoming victims of what's happening in the environment, and use this moment in time as an opportunity for us to really move ahead. Move ahead in a way that is significantly aligned with our mission. And it's a mission that I think has really stood the test of time and is as true today as it's ever been. It's an incredibly challenging time. I get that, but it's also a unique time for us to, in some sense, step into our mission, be aggressive about doing so, which will help us really navigate the choppy waters ahead. And that's why we're doing this now. Now, the good news is we've got some really outstanding folks helping us think through this. And one of the individuals that has helped us really navigate through this process is Chris Jones. Chris has really kind of mapped out nicely for us what a process may look like. And we've been able to, I don't think he was able to join us today because I think he actually has class, which is a really good reason for not being here. Aaron Buchko has been a strategic partner in our thinking as well. And has just been a phenomenal thought partner as we've gone through this. And Chris is going to lay out for you here in just a second what the process is going to look like. And happy to talk about that in detail. But before we do, I'm going to pause my comments. And what I would like to do is, actually, let me just check my notes here. A couple other things I want to talk about. Oh yeah, I'm going to pick up on some of the things that Matt mentioned. This is why I put notes out ahead of time. We're going to move fast on this. One of the things we're hoping to do is have this relatively wrapped up as we go into the June Board of Trustees meeting. Our plan is to have the strategy approved by the Board of Trustees in June so that it can be baked into the budget that happens in August. And that ends up being a fairly important piece to make sure that we actually have the resources we need for the strategy to be successful. To do that, because we're moving fast, because we're being relatively aggressive here, one of the things we're not going to try to do is we're not going to try to boil the ocean here. This is not going to be a detailed operational manual as much as it is going to be some guidepost on the direction that we're heading. And then we'll all work collectively on identifying the activities that are going to help us get there. So this will get us directionally moving in the right direction. And that's really what the strategy is all about. So at this point, what I'd like to do is hand it over to Chris. But again, before I do so, any questions or comments about any of the things I shared about why we're doing this now, and then Chris can talk about some of the specific details. All right, Chris, they're really interested in the details. So I'll turn it over to you and you can share a little bit more of the specifics and then we can open up to general conversation.
All right, sounds good. Thank you very much. And thanks to Matt for organizing this. And thank you all for being here and taking time out of your busy schedules to learn a little bit more about both the substance and the process of our strategic direction. I've only been in my role for 4 months, and I think it was only a month into my duties that President Standiford said, well, we're going to do university strategic planning. So that was a little bit of a surprise. for some
Sorry,
of the
Chris,
reasons.
just got to pause here though, but it is in your title, actually.
It
Vice
is.
President of
It is, yeah.
Strategy and
I
Innovation.
only thought we were going to kind of ramp up, but this is all good. For the reasons you said, we absolutely need to do this. And I'm pleased that he noted Matt's partnership. Matt's been a great partner along the way. And President Standevar and I have consulted with Matt regularly to make sure, that we're calibrating this in a reasonable way. We have consulted with a number of the vice presidents and some of your deans. And I also want to say with the president said that Aaron Buchko has been a great thought partner moving forward. He's spent a lot of time and effort working with me to sort of figure out how this process might work. And then he was in all the meetings that we had with Matt and the president, just again, so it wasn't just one person trying to create this. And again, a lot of input from the VPs as well. So many thanks to all who contributed to what this looks like now. And I think that both Matt and the president are right in sort of saying that we've tried to strike a balance between expediency and inclusivity. And what I want to do is just take you through the steps of the process fairly quickly, and then tell you exactly today what we've accomplished so far. And of course, we've plenty of time for questions. But I do want to say too, please feel free to reach out to me. I hope that, I've been here for 7 years, that you would feel comfortable reaching out to me. If you don't, please, reach out to your dean or your senator or your vice president. I'm going to keep the Senate well informed. I'm going to keep the vice presidents well informed and the deans as well. So they'll have information for you, but feel free that you can reach out to me directly if you're comfortable doing so. So the first part of the process was essentially establishing the process. And that's why President Standevar went to the Senate and to the Senate Executive Committee and to the academic leadership and to senior leadership to talk about what the process would look like, so we could get more feedback from the community before he finalized that process officially on December 15th. Since that time, we've worked on populating the strategic planning groups, which I'll talk a little bit more about. And we've now sort of moved into our phase of external data gathering. So we have contracted with a firm to do a market analysis, which I'll give you some more information about in a few seconds. We are in the process of holding Senate forums, and this is the second one. We had one last Thursday, as Matt indicated. There will be focus groups with students that faculty and staff members will facilitate in the coming weeks. As many of you know, if you've been monitoring your email, which I'm sure you had, there was a Qualtrics survey invitation that went out on the 19th and closed on the 29th, and we'll be accumulating that information and sharing it with the strategic planning groups. And once that is done and those tasks are completed, then we sort of move into our foundational work. And that's when a group of, or range, I should say, of faculty and staff teams are going to come together to complete important pieces of information that will help a strategic leadership group come up with our strategic direction. So one faculty and staff team, team one, will work on a strategic profile that really focuses on Bradley's alignment with the needs of higher education learners these days. Another faculty and staff team, team two, will work on an environmental and industrial analysis, which is sort of looks at the challenges and the opportunities, both regionally and nationally, for higher education, for Bradley in particular. And then a third team of faculty and staff members will work on a competitive assessment to say, how does Bradley stack up with its peer institutions? What advantages and disadvantages does it seem to have in this ever-changing landscape? At the same time, and in fact, I have to go, a big shout out to Joby Skaggs. We had asked for sort of a summary of where our current strategic plan stands, the achievements, and there were several, and areas where there hasn't been time because of COVID and other realities that we haven't reached. And I received that over the weekend, and thank you very much, Joby. I see you on the call. And we will be sharing that with faculty and staff teams and the strategic leadership group as well. We're going to work to have a number of important pieces of information out there to the teams. So once that's done, the work then of the strategic leadership group begins. They draw on the work of the teams that have done the competitive assessment and the strategic profile and the environmental scan, and then they will work to form a vision statement and a strategic position for the university. Once that's set, The work then goes to the University Strategic Planning Committee, which is populated per the handbook. And the Strategic Planning Committee will be focused on populating tactics, actual action items that would align with the strategic position and the vision that has been articulated by the Strategic Leadership Group. Once USPC completes its work, that work goes back to the Strategic Leadership Group, and the Strategic Leadership Group determines the final strategic plan, which is then forwarded to the Board of Trustees for final approval, and as the president said appropriately, for appropriate resourcing. We realize that the plan will not be successful if the board doesn't support it and doesn't resource it properly. Once the board has voted positively, we will have a communications plan. We will monitor the plan moving forward quarterly with the board and with the community. And we will also ask divisions and colleges to begin working on strategic plans that focus on their important work, but also are in alignment with the strategic plan of the university. So you might ask at this point, well, what exactly have we done? Well, I've indicated to you that we have shopped the process, if you will, with various groups on campus, and I think I identified who they were. We have now populated, but I should thank people. I want to thank Nathan Thomas for populating the staff elements of the strategic planning groups, if I can spit that out. And he was very good about making sure that folks didn't just come from his division, but also came from athletics and from advancement and from enrollment management. I want to thank the deans for populating the teams as well. They were great in getting their appointments quickly to me, as well as President Staniford and Provost Sakahi. And then lastly, Matt Tim and the Senate Executive Committee were responsible for some appointments on these teams as well. So if you look at a particular team, let's say the strategic profile team, you would see that there are 5 dean's appointments, 1 from each of the colleges. And then there are 2 appointments from Nathan representing staff. And then there is an appointment from USPC, which Walter made in consultation with the USPC. And then there was at least 1 representative that the Senate executive chose, mainly out of concerns for diversity and appropriate expertise. So if you look at the focus group conveners, the strategic profile team, the environmental scan team, and the competitive assessment team, there are 36 faculty and staff members across all of the colleges and divisions. So I think that's pretty good representation. You can then add in the University Strategic Planning Committee, which has about 20 members, and that's populated per the handbook. And then there are 17 members of the Strategic Leadership Group. So in total, there are 73 appointments or positions that have been filled and are representative of the community. You might say that's a lot of people to have involved. It is, but we're designed to be, participatory and inclusive. At the same time, I think there's tremendous burden sharing going on here because no one group is going to be involved in the entire process. So for instance, if you're on the profile team or on the competitive assessment team, you're going to do your work for 4 or 5 weeks, and then that will be done and the ball is handed off to Strategic Leadership Group. And the Strategic Leadership Group will meet for a while and pass the ball off to USPC, and then USPC will pass the ball back to Strategic Leadership Group. So we're trying to be reasonable about the work effort of everyone involved. In addition to the forms being completed as of today, the Qualtrics survey has been completed, and we are now waiting the market analysis from a firm called Quester, which is based in Des Moines, Iowa. And Quester is an award-winning consumer intelligence firm that uses both qualitative and quantitative data to study why actors, consumers, in this case, higher education learners, choose college. What are the motivating forces behind their selection? Why do they hire a college like Bradley University to do the work that they do? And why do they not? And why sometimes do they fire a college for not? So this is all based on a theory, which would take probably more time than I have today to explain, but it's called jobs to be done theory. And we're going to put a primer up on the strategic planning website. But essentially, it's a theory that was developed by a Harvard Business School professor, Clay Christensen, and it really looks at why people choose specific products and services and what are the underlying emotional and personal and social, cultural, and environmental forces that shape that. So this firm is going to be involved in not only surveying, but also talking to students that are interested in higher education, who are engaged in higher education right now, both regionally and nationally, students that know Bradley University and students that don't, students who are interested in undergraduate education and graduate education, people who are interested in maybe credentialing and improving their lives. And we're going to use that information to help inform the strategic planning process, including the works of those faculty and staff teams that I talked about earlier. Aaron Buchko, a name you'll hear more and more because he's going to be helping me, will be helping me craft charters for each of the strategic planning groups that will include objectives, deliverables, the process, obviously some key due dates, but also resources that the group should consult. And I want to make it clear to the community that we will be looking at our current strategic plan. We will be looking at the strategic plan accomplishments document that I was thanking Joby for. We will be looking at the HLC assurance argument. President Stanford said that we can look at the Huron report. We will have the Quester market analysis. We will have the focus group results from our students. We will have the faculty and staff Qualtrics survey results. So there'll be a lot of external data gathering that will help form this process. So there will not be one person or one piece of information that's driving this, but rather this will be a very multivariate process. We will post materials with Jenny Burgess' help on the University Strategic Planning website. And we, again, as I said, we'll have regular updates at the Senate, but I'll make sure that the academic and administrative leadership is well informed. And again, please reach out to me anytime if you have a question, a concern, a complaint. We want to hear those, and we want to try and make this process as good as it can be. So thank you very much. I'm happy to take questions, or we can turn it over just to general comments like we did the other day, Steve, which were very helpful.
So are there any questions, comments? You guys are being much more quiet than the group was on Thursday.
Matt, Chris, and I are all trained professors, so we know how to handle long periods of silence when we're looking for people to participate. So just to warn you.
This is Steve Tippett, the interim dean of the College of Education and Health Sciences, and I think it's very refreshing to know, at least in my opinion, that a plan is going to be tied to financial resources. I mean, that's I think the only way to get it done. So that was a refreshing take on this, and I'm glad that that component is included, because without that, you know, it's kind of shooting in the dark. So appreciate that.
Thank you, Steve. We thought that was really important, and that's also why getting the trustees deeply engaged. And there will be 3 trustees on the strategic leadership group, so they'll be carrying that message back as well. So appreciate that. There was a question in the chat, which I'm happy to tackle. How many years out will the strategic plan accommodate? You know, it's interesting. I don't know that we've established a time frame. I think 5 years ago, everybody got excited about developing strategies 2020. That had a lot of appeal to it for a variety of reasons. Really think of it as directional. And one of the things I'm a fan of, I'll confess my bias. I was a strategy professor for many years. I get nervous about strategic plans that try to predict what's going to happen 10, 15 years from now. I think you get directionally moving in the right direction, and then you continue to get feedback and make adjustments as you go. So the other thing that I would suggest is probably think 3 to 5 years out if I had to put some time frame with it, but it will be dynamic. And one of the things that we'll be doing is we'll constantly be assessing our strategy to see if it is aligning with what we anticipated, collecting new information, and then adjusting the strategy as we move forward to recognize that the environment will likely change from what we have predicted. So probably 3 to 5 years out, but think of it as a more dynamic approach than perhaps what we've done before, where it's, again, all the plans for 2020, and then you see how much of that for many organizations didn't pan out necessarily the way they anticipated. 2020 wasn't like what anybody anticipated, I think, which threw everybody's strategy off.
Yeah, I think we'll be assessing annually and we'll be calibrating annually.
By the way, for what it's worth, I love that question because it gives us a chance to talk about how this is perhaps a little bit different than some of the things we've done in the past, where there's this big strategic plan with that you have all these things you're going to execute within a 5-year time frame. It'll be directional and it'll help us move in the right direction, and we'll make adjustments as we go.
And I probably should have mentioned too, that when we sent out the Qualtrics survey email from President Stanford and myself, there was a 2-page overview attached to that email that provided the steps. And we'll put that those procedural steps on the university website as well. So just in case you were wondering, oh, Chris is talking fast and what are all these steps and who are all these people? I'll also put the full list of all the participants to the strategic leadership group and the various teams as well. We're just finalizing one more appointment, and once that's done, that will go on the website. So hopefully later this week, a lot of that information will be up. I think you're muted, Mike.
Mike, yeah.
Hang on, there we go.
There
Can you put the URL of the strategic planning? If you do a search on the university site, you get all kinds of other stuff.
So say that again, the first part in here, put the URL.
Just put up the URL for the site that you keep talking about.
Have we updated that yet, Chris? Has we updated?
We have not updated it yet. So
Okay.
if you go to it now, Mike, it would have everything for the current plan.
Okay,
So
all right.
I have
Okay.
a meeting with, that's okay, just so you know and others do. I have a meeting with Jenny this afternoon at 3, and we're going to talk about how to leave some of that stuff there, because we got to be mindful of that with HLC. I don't want to take that down at all, but then start to provide resources for the current process. So it might be 2 columns. So we'll send a message out to the community when that stuff's up.
All right, good, thanks.
So great question around how will the university strategic plan tied resources trickle down to the strategic plan of the colleges and departments? So it's an interesting question, and maybe I'll phrase it in a different way, but it'll answer your question, I hope in the process. One of the things that we plan to do is, once we've got general direction, the actionable items will be developed by the University Strategic Planning Committee and will also happen within the colleges. So as we're developing those action items, the resources, I mean, those are how we move forward with the strategy. So it'll be immediately tied to those resources. Now what we haven't done yet is exactly figured out, how that's going to go across the board. But I think the idea, Chris, is that when the University Strategic Planning Committee feeds some of that information back to the strategic leadership group, that's when we'll be thinking about how we're going to be allocating these resources. But the work of the strategy really happens exactly in the departments, in the areas, in the different parts of the university. So that's exactly where those resources would go. Exactly what that looks like will depend a lot on how the strategy actually plays out. Chris, do you want to add any more to that? That was clunky a little bit on my part on responding to that.
No, I think I would just add that the colleges have to be in alignment with the strategic plan. And I think the elements of the plan that are in alignment with the university plan is where more of the resources would be available, from my understanding. So, if we're going to essentially emphasize or double down on certain areas as a university community, if there's an initiative at the college level that syncs well with that, that would probably be more likely to receive resources than something else.
Well stated. Yeah. To that point a little bit, Chris, once the strategy is in place, we'll be, our CFO, Jeff Blade, I know is on the call today. One of the things that Jeff and I've talked a lot about is we're looking for areas where we can make investments, if you will, where we can really leverage and move forward with our strategic plan. So as that strategy emerges, we'll be looking for opportunities to make those investments. So that alignment within the colleges, within the departments is going to be fairly important, so that we have places to be able to deploy those resources to do what it is we're trying to do.
And I think the emphasis needs to be on pillars of strength and distinction. And I would encourage people not just to think about, a major or a program, but rather as a university community, what are Bradley's strengths, across the board, and then how do multiple colleges and programs and departments play into those strengths? And what does Bradley want to be known for? What are we going to excel in? What are we going to choose to do? And what are we perhaps choosing to de-emphasize and not do as well? So I don't think we can probably be all things to all people in this hyper competitive market, but what do we do really well and what should we be emphasizing? And I think, as Steve said at the beginning of his remarks, there are so many good possibilities there.
Matt, I think we're going to make our 1 o'clock appointments. Okay.
It's
It
the
looks
quiet
like it.
group. Yeah.
It's a quiet group.
Yeah. I don't want to prematurely cut off the conversation. I will say too, though, as you're processing this, one of the things that I sometimes need to do, I can't remember what it was a report I saw the other day, had a ton of information, and it took me about 2 days to really absorb it all. And then I came back and had a bunch of questions. So we'll try to create mechanisms so that if you have questions after you've had a chance to process some of this information, this is not a one and done. This is going to be an ongoing dialogue. And there will be ways to get information or questions and comments into us throughout the process.
Yeah, along those lines, folks are certainly welcome to come to Senate meetings and ask the president questions about this after his remarks at Senate.
Yep.
And also along those lines, I got several emails, over Friday and over the weekend from folks who had things to say after the meeting finished on Thursday, and I just forwarded them all to the president and Chris Jones. I anonymized those that wanted to be anonymized. So.
Yep. So Ahmad has a good question here on how do we ensure that this strategic plan exercise reveals opportunities that the previous one did not reveal? Boy, it's a really interesting question, and it has a lot to do with how we're starting this process. One of the things that we're being very thoughtful about, in fact, I've had several questions, well, what's going to be in the plan? And I think Chris and I've had to be very disciplined about saying, we don't know yet, right? I mean, that's one of the, I have a meeting with the board on Friday, the board of trustees, and I guarantee they're going to be pressing me. What do you think is going to be in them? Like, time out, that would be premature. Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to be really disciplined in this process to really let that emerge from two things, really. First of all, we're going to do some conversations with our students, both current, prospective, and students that we didn't successfully attract. One of the things that I'm a big fan of is any good strategy starts by looking outside of the organization and trying to understand the environment in which you operate. So that's going to be a big part of it. And then collectively taking feedback from different groups around kind of our pockets of strengths and how well those align with some of the market demands, and collectively trying to come up with what makes sense. So we really are trying to be disciplined in terms of listening internally and externally to get feedback before we put the strategy together. So I think if we are disciplined about that and we do a good job with it, what that will reveal is perhaps opportunities that we haven't thought about before. And I'm particularly interested in that external research. When we maybe hear some student interest and demand that we hadn't previously thought about that actually aligns particularly well with what we do. And so that front end research ends up being an important part of this process. And it's interesting, we've had to be very disciplined to let that play out. One of the things Chris and I both had to pace is we're ready to move on this. We want to be impatient in healthy ways, but we also want to be thoughtful. So the term I've followed, it's an old John Wooden quote, be quick, but don't hurry. And it's an old basketball reference for those that are interested. But the idea is we're going to try to move fast, but we're not going to hurry through this. And I actually think the front end part of it is going to be really critical. And that's the part that we're being really thoughtful not to shortchange, to make sure that we're collecting that input so that we can discover those opportunities that we would miss if we rush through that part of the process. It's challenging because we're ready to go, right? I mean, Chris is maybe one of the best project managers I've ever had the pleasure of working with, and has done just a spectacular process of mapping out the process. And he's also helping us keep a quick pace on this. And part of that is being disciplined to make sure we do that research up front.
And frankly, you told me that over the weekend when I said, I'm going to pull these teams together, and you said, well, we don't want them to do their substantive work until we have that work done by Quester, the firm in Iowa that's doing the market analysis too. So I can tell you right now on this call, the process will be delayed, but be delayed for a good reasons. We'll get the teams up and running, we'll give them their charters, but until we have that critical piece of information, we're going to be in a holding pattern so that we can do this in a thoughtful way. So I'm a self-aware type A person, so I will try to take a chill as we go along here.
Yeah. Actually, I'm going to build on that comment and say that I'll be pushing this, but I would encourage you all to challenge us too. As we start rolling this out, if you look at it and say, how is this any different than anything we've ever done before? What opportunities, we're not seeing any new opportunities here. We're not seeing, the market is evolving and we should be doing the same. And if it starts looking too plain vanilla, call us out on it. I'm comfortable with that. I think it's a challenge, a way we need to challenge ourselves. It's a really competitive industry right now. And if we're going to be successful, we have to really understand how we position ourselves well. And we've got the underlying strengths to do that, but we've got to be really thoughtful about that. And that's one of the things we're going to have to be disciplined to make sure it comes out of our discussion.
And we can't waste people's time. This has to count for something. So if people are going to spend time and effort in this, it can't stay on a shelf. We have to resource it. We have to implement it, and it's got to help the university. So in that direction, please give us feedback.
I'm sure one thing the president would like to hear is those of you that are here today, do you have 2 or 3 things you think should be priorities? Could maybe start a little bit of a discussion here.
Yeah.
He's known for months what my 2 or 3 top priorities are, so it's time for him to listen to somebody else.
Hey, Matt, I may take a slightly different angle to see if I can get a little bit more participation. When you hear that external feedback, I'm a strong proponent that then you have to understand how that aligns with your underlying strengths that you can leverage. So I'd be interested in your thoughts when you step back and think, this is what is distinctly Bradley. This is what makes us strong. Does anything particularly jump out to you as a key piece that is something we absolutely can leverage as we move forward?
I have something that just came into my private chat that's both a strength and perhaps something we need to focus on. Bradley seems to be doing a good job of recruiting diverse students and a less good job of supporting them after they get here.
Yeah. Great. That's exactly the kind of feedback we need. So thank you to whoever shared that. Appreciate it.
So again, folks, if you feel you'd rather have me act as a filter, put it in a private chat to me and I'll put it out there. Let me see here. Another thing in the private chat, are we going to be willing to make tough decisions that may need to be made?
Yes. Actually, one of the things that Chris, I think, appropriately identified is a strategy tells you what you're going to do and what you're not going to do as well. I think we've already made a bunch of tough decisions this year, and I think everybody's seen and felt a lot of that. I think the better way of thinking about it is we will be thoughtful around how we allocate our scarce resources. So as we look to resource the strategy, our focus will be on those things that we feel are going to best move the organization forward. So I think that's a key. Strategy professor for many years, and I was always fond of saying, you don't have a strategy till you decide what not to do. And there are certain things that we are just not going to be able to invest in as much. And that's part of the strategic planning process, absolutely.
Here's another one in the chat to me. This again is both a strength and perhaps something to think about going forward in terms of that might need some more resources. I'm going to read this as a more or less direct quote. And the quote says, I think our faculty directed research experiences are one of Bradley's best features. They are true experiential learning. But if those departments that provide them aren't supported with funding, the projects are limited and may become outdated.
Great. And that comment touches on something else we've heard a lot about, or I've heard a lot about, is our true strengths in experiential education. That's something that a lot of universities talk about today, and it's become almost cliche because so many people talk about it all the time. But here, when you look under the hood, there really is something there. The faculty directed research being one of the pieces of that. That is a real strength of ours.
Here's another one in the private chat. We have many strong programs now that provide great outcomes for students. I worry about us focusing on providing resources for shiny new programs and not investing in the strong programs that we currently have.
Is that you look like you're still reading, Matt? Was that the?
No, well, I just got 3 more here. So,
Okay.
so that was the end of that one.
So I will say, if the strong programs are really strong, that should emerge in this research, right? I mean, that's one of the things when we're focusing on this front end of input. The strengths of programs should become more obvious, not less. And you don't build a strategy by going out and doing everything new. Now, you may have to do some things differently. You may have to do some new things, but you got to build on your strengths. That's a key part of being successful strategically. So those strong programs, I suspect, will continue to be strong, and we'll get. I don't know what. Again, I'm trying to be very careful not to presuppose what we're going to be doing, but I feel very confident we're going to be making investments in strong programs. That's going to be a key part of our strategy moving forward.
So here's another one.
Okay.
This is both about process and a question about going forward. So the faculty survey asked a lot of good questions, but the ideas might have been better developed if there was a chance for faculty to talk together and had the questions ahead of time. Is there any plan for follow-up focus groups to get more faculty input?
There isn't presently, but there can be with collaboration with the Senate or other folks on campus, whether it be the deans or wherever the organization would take place, but that would be fine with me.
And I'll make a note of that too, and we can
Likewise.
think about doing a couple of forums after we get a little bit farther into the process.
Okay, let's talk about that, Matt. That sounds good.
One of the things we're trying to balance, and Matt's been a very thoughtful partner in this, so another shout out to Matt on this one, is how do we balance the opportunities for people to participate and not overwhelm anybody in a really busy semester. So to Chris's point, I think we'd be very open to creating those opportunities, recognizing that everybody's really, really stretched and want to be thoughtful about how do we use people's time.
Got another couple more here in the private chat. Because of the pandemic, remote learning has been prioritized out of necessity. In a return to normalcy, will Bradley continue to devote resources to remote learning?
That's a great question. That really comes down to what the market tells us. Part of our research is going to be helping us understand how important that is moving forward. I got to say, one of the things that's been a real kind of aha moment for me during the pandemic is an appreciation for how much our students value the on-campus experience. The pressure we've gotten to make sure that we are on campus has been phenomenal, much greater than, quite frankly, I anticipated. The other side, interesting learning is we had no idea how much the students love the library. A lot of love for the library because it was unavailable. And you learn a lot how much somebody values something when they no longer have access to it. And so is there a role for online moving forward? Of course. I mean, I think that's inevitable at some level. Is there a big interest in a traditional on-campus experience? Absolutely. We can see and feel that as well. And so that would be part of what this externally oriented research does for us. But at least from what I've seen, and Nathan, I know you're on the call, I'm looking at your box because you probably felt this pressure a lot too, how badly our students want to be on campus right now and how much that's an important part of their overall experience. And so when we do things like cancel spring break, we got a lot of feedback about that, by the way. But we also got equally strong feedback around do whatever you have to do to make sure we can be on campus. And that's just been a really, really strong pressure. Which has been, by the way, that was a nice revelation, I think, for a lot of us that, that campus experience, the opportunities to interact with each other, to interact with faculty and staff is a powerful part of our overall model. Well, I'm seeing a bunch of questions pop up on chat, which is good.
Yeah, I got another one direct to me. This is a long one. I'm going to compress this a bit. And if I leave out something important, the person that sent it to me can resend. So sort of the header here is recruitment to me is a priority.
Yeah.
There's comments about at present, there doesn't seem to be as a goal in that recruitment process to get students to come to Bradley for specific majors. They're just trying to get bodies in the door. And then the person volunteers to become more involved as a partner with recruitment and admissions.
That's great. Well, I almost wish Justin was on the call with us, Justin Ball, our VP of Enrollment Services, because the enrollment process is such a complicated process. Part of it is identifying and making opportunities available to students that they're interested in. And part of it is making them aware of the opportunities that we have that they may not be aware of. And there's a bit of a dance there in trying to do both of those. One of the things we'll be paying, again, part of this external approach helps us understand perhaps more where their interests are, so we can be thoughtful about how we think about the mix of opportunities and programs that we offer. But part of what we're going to be doing, and Jeff Blade has been helping lead some of this, is I think there's opportunities for us to tell our story a little bit better. There are some things that we do that are real strengths that are not particularly well known. I think Steve Kerr was on the call earlier. I don't know if he's still here or not, but we've talked a little bit about our accounting program. And from a performance perspective, it's a very, very strong program that is perhaps not as well known in the marketplace as it could be. So I think there's opportunities on both sides of that equation, if you will, and that's something that we're being really thoughtful about moving forward as well. What are those opportunities to both promote those things that we do that are particularly strong, and our opportunities for our students to have success if they go into those programs? And then what are the things that the students are really interested in doing that we need to pay more attention to? So that'll be an interesting balance for us as we move forward, trying to figure out what that mix looks like. And if Justin was here, he'd talk about it in a much more articulate way. But it's a little bit of doing both. You know, there's a comment in the chat on, can you define a strong program, please? Is it based on the number of majors or the student credit hours or both? What is an acceptable percentage of affiliate usage? It's a great question. And I'm going to punt on a little bit because I don't think it's that clean. I don't think it's just the credit hours. I don't think it's just the number of majors. It could be that there's some programs that, and I'm going to be clunky as I describe this, that are reputation builders, for example, that may not necessarily even have the strong credit hours, but they create phenomenal awareness and notoriety for the university. I've seen that at other institutions where a program that is relatively small and elite is still a really good program for the university because it creates a lot of notoriety. And so, or it could be just a really big program as well. I mean, there are different ways to think about what makes a program strong. And I think we'd be premature to suggest that there's a clear definition of a strong program. And that's something that hopefully we'll get more understanding of as we go through this process. Chris, do you want to comment on that at all? Does that align a little bit with some of the things we've talked about as well?
Yeah, I think it aligns well. I mean, there's some things that are going to add to the overall experience of the, you know, the education that students are receiving. So,
Yeah.
I mean, you have to consider number of majors and credit hours, but it shouldn't be that cookie cutter. You need to consider, I think,
Yeah.
a range of factors.
So there's a question around the jobs to be done approach, and is there a track record of where it's worked? Has it been applied to higher education? Are there concerns about using this methodology? That's an interesting question. And Chris, the more we get into this, I'm wondering if at some point we hold a session just around those that want to learn more about jobs to be done.
Mm-hmm.
We're actually going to be doing this for the Board of Trustees on Friday because they're going to have the same questions that you all are having. And so we're going to do a dedicated conversation with them around what the jobs to be done piece is all about. Has it been done in higher ed? Actually, part of the reason we went with Quester, which is the firm that's helping us do some of this work, is they have some pretty good higher education experience. So they do have some experience with this approach. One of the things that makes the model a little clunky is the jobs to be done is a term that can turn some people off. Maybe it's work to be done, transformation to be had.
Mm-hmm.
There's got a lot of different ways you could phrase it. And that's something that we'll have to be thoughtful about as we move forward in this conversation. But I think it would be helpful to have a session where people can learn more about this methodology if they're interested. I know in having Aaron Buchko share more about it with me, I became a bit of a convert, not a model I was familiar with before Aaron introduced it to me. And his summary really helped convince me and others like Chris that it was a good model for us moving forward. So that's something that maybe we should be prepared to share.
Yeah, I would agree with those comments as well. As an LAS person, I needed to be converted, but I think it's going to be helpful, and it's a different approach that I think will provide information that we haven't considered before. So, Matt, I'm wondering about like maybe a series of Friday sessions. Maybe one Friday we do jobs to be done. One Friday we do what the colleague was suggesting, that we talk more about some of the survey questions and allow for, you know, a more group dynamic So I think if we could get together and figure out what would serve the community best and maybe do 3 or 4 consecutive Fridays with a different focus, it might be helpful. That's
Okay.
just my
That's
thoughts.
fine. Yeah, let's talk about that. I've got a couple more in the private chat here. One person comments that academics that support healthcare related careers should be a priority since that's a growing market. Skipping down, I have a very long one here. I'm going to try to summarize. The person wants you to be aware that the limiting factor on much of this might be how low faculty morale is at present.
Yeah.
And then lists a number of things which have decreased that morale, increased teaching load, the firings, competition between departments that appear as part of program prioritization, decrease in benefits, the pandemic, remote learning, canceling spring break.
Yeah, but and I hear you on all that. And the vicious cycle is if we don't do this process, some of the ugliness of what's happening in the higher education market today just continues for us. So this is a little bit of kind of the double-edged sword, if you will. It's a horrible time to be going through some of this. It's an absolutely necessary time to be going through some of this. I hear and feel the morale issues. We're not alone on that. The whole, you'll see a video coming out later today, I think, where student body president Emma Hoytia, who's just phenomenal, and I talk about last semester and this upcoming semester. And her comments, she's such a star when you get a chance to see her. Her comments is the whole world is hurting right now. And some of the tension and morale issues we're facing, I forget, it was one of the sessions we had. There are Bradley issues, there are COVID issues, and then there are Bradley COVID issues. I thought, what a nice way to categorize it. And one of the things we've got to sort out is what fits into what bucket. And a lot of the morale issues, quite frankly, are COVID-related issues that the whole world's suffering with. I think part of the way we break the cycle is by engaging in this process now so that we can start mapping out a path that allows us to make the type of decisions we want to be making moving forward instead of the type of decisions that continue to chip away at the morale. And that's part of what I was trying to suggest in my opening comments. But I'll kind of reinforce that now. There's hope on the horizon, and part of the way we get there is by being thoughtful about how we navigate through this process now. But Matt, if you're comfortable doing, I'd like to capture that list of things that were mentioned, just to be, and if you could maybe forward without attribution the list, that would be fantastic. That would be helpful.
Yeah, alrighty. I know there's an easier way to do this, but I'll do it a way that I know works.
Okay, copy paste.
Yeah.
There was another comment there about healthcare. It's interesting. I'll just touch on that. That has become a real strength of ours. I think it's, I'll periodically share with people, for example, how big our nursing program is. And a lot of folks outside of the institution are surprised to hear how big that program has gotten. It has become a real strength of ours. And the market's beginning to recognize that. I think a variety of individuals internally already knew that. And there are other health programs on campus that are continuing to grow as well. If it is the strength that we think it is, that will show up in this work that we're doing on the front end. And that'll be something that we highlight. And it does continue to be a hot market. And that's something that we think we know. And I'm always a good fan of, and then you do the research to check your understanding, which is one of the things we'll be doing right now. Other comments coming in, Matt?
I have one here I need to answer in the chat. Right now, I have nothing else that I think isn't in the public chat.
Okay. Chris, anything else you'd want to add that maybe we missed that we were hoping somebody would ask about or you wanted to cover?
No, I was curious as well about, the points of distinction that people might emphasize. I thought I was going to ask that question if you didn't ask it.
Yeah.
I think we're interested in substantive thoughts and procedural ones as well. I mean, there was a pretty robust discussion last time about Peoria. Is that an asset to leverage? Is it one that we shouldn't be leveraging? I mean, and the president and I said afterwards, we would have loved to ask more questions or have, gotten involved in that. But
yeah,
when you talk about experiential learning, I think the president's right. So many institutions do that, but what's distinct about the way we do it, or what could we really leverage, or what should we be promising students on the front end that they're going to receive with regard to experiential learning? I mean, that's one of the things that really impressed me when I came to Bradley about how well we do undergraduate research in artistry, study abroad, service learning, internships. But, is there a way to cast that in a certain way that would really be appealing to prospective students and their loved ones? I love the thought of bringing disciplines together to solve problems.
I don't know if Ahmad is still on. I was just looking. I was gonna go back to his comment around how do we ensure we reveal opportunities that we previously did not reveal. And I'm just kind of curious if anybody's got any thoughts on things they're hoping we discover or dig into deeper that we haven't touched on. I'm going to resist the temptation to pull a class tactic where you just start calling on people. I'm not going to do that. That would not be appropriate in this case, but I want people to feel like they're interested in participating, but open to whatever comments or questions you may have. And if you're in the session before, and I know that we've got some repeat participants, you're welcome to ask more questions.
Steve, Bree asked a question about diversity and inclusion and how that would be accounted for within the plan.
Yeah. Yeah, by the way, the comment that somebody shared with Matt that we do a good job of attracting a diverse student population, but don't make them feel as inclusive when they get here, that was a real aha moment for me as well, because I think I've shared with some of you, I am a nerd at heart, and I had a spreadsheet put together about the university before I even came here. And one of the things at the top of the spreadsheet for me was the fact that we do a really good job of really both students of color and first generation college students, which I think is a real strength, the fact that we attract them. I did learn that we could do a much better job of making them feel included when they get here. And I suspect our research is going to tell us that as well. And so I think that's something that as we do our research, I mean, some of the research we've already done has told us that. And I said, and we're using research we've already created as inputs for the strategic plan. So we already know there's some opportunities there. And that's something that we are looking at rather aggressively. We put together, I commissioned a task force a few months ago on diversity and inclusion headed by one of our alums, Glenn Ross. Phenomenal job. And they put together a series of recommendations, and we're going to be using that research that they did as input to the strategic planning process. That is one of the many pieces that we're going to put in, but that's an important piece that we'll be using as well. So I've had some questions around what happened to that report, and it's very much vibrant and alive, and it is already designed to be part of the input process as we go into this. And I could go into details on some of the recommendations if everybody's interested, but know that that is a high priority for us to use that as part of the strategic planning process.
Here's a comment in the private chat again. There are opportunities for departments to form collaborative majors, but since the focus is on numbers of students in each department and student credit hours, the departments that should be working together end up competing.
Oh, that's interesting feedback. Yeah.
And then here's an interesting, the last sentence in this then makes admissions job even harder on visit days
Absolutely.
because of that competition.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're far too siloed for the size of our institution. But it's not lost on me that the program prioritization process didn't help that. I think the president realized that culturally that was problematic. We have to find ways, whether it's with interdisciplinary majors or interdisciplinary hires or experiential learning, to work across departments and colleges. That's in line with the direction of 21st century higher education.
There's a classic Harvard Business Review article, a different Stephen Kerr, that talks about the folly of rewarding A and expecting B. And so this is a kind of a classic, the title of the article kind of gives it all away, that we often want something to happen, but we're rewarding in a way that creates the exact opposite. So Matt, I've written this down, but Chris, I hope you did as well. And Matt, I think we're capturing some of this. But that's a really interesting observation, that if we want, if for example, the research tells us that, now I wouldn't be surprised if this is the case, that we want collaborative, cross-disciplinary experiential education, are we rewarding that in a way, or are we penalizing folks that actually do that? And that's something we'll have to make sure that is in alignment as part of our strategic planning process.
And that hits in other areas too, President Staniford, and it goes along with the current strategic plan as well. If you're going to embrace engaged learning, then we need to recognize and reward that through our annual evaluation processes, the tenure and promotion processes. It's got to be reflected in the bylaws and the guidelines of colleges and departments. So I think we do a great job at experiential learning, but I don't think we're not where we need to be with regard to recognizing and rewarding it. So that's
this is an interesting conversation. As that I'm thinking about this, one of the things I'm going to take a note on is it's, in order for this strategy to be successful, two things have to align. First of all, we have to have the resources, and we also need to make sure the systems are aligned to support it as well.
Right.
And if our systems aren't supporting what it is we're trying to accomplish, it's going to be very difficult for us to make headway on this. So this is that's something we'll have to be really thoughtful as part of the strategic planning process, is what systems need to change to help us do what it is we've outlined that we want to do. And boy, that's I'm thinking out loud, but boy, have I seen that over the years at different institutions, and I'm sure here as well, where well-intended behaviors get shut down by systems that make it very difficult to do certain things. And that's something we'll just have to be really thoughtful about. I've only been here 8 months, 8 years, 8 days. It's tough to tell during a pandemic because it all seems, time gets weird. But it hasn't taken me long to figure out that we've got some systems work to do here as well, that there are definitely some systems that are probably getting in the way of people being able to do good work.
Steve, I have one here that I think I could probably answer, but I'll kick it over to you. What is the status of program prioritization? Has that been dropped, paused?
It has. So we made a formal announcement on that, and I'm happy to reinforce it here. We have stopped that. It's interesting. The intent of the program prioritization, I understand, I appreciate it. I'm also fairly familiar with that process, and I think there's a better way to be able to identify opportunities for investment. The strategic planning process will help us do some of that. And my experience has been that program prioritization doesn't get you what you need, but it's really rough on the organization going through that process. So we have formally put that not just on pause, we're done with it. And I informed the trustees about that. I think at the last meeting, I'm trying to remember what meeting, I shared with them that we were no longer moving forward with program prioritization, and they were supportive of us doing so as well.
Here's another one in the public chat, but then in the private chat, sorry, but then there is one in the public chat to everyone. Let me Is there a reason the diversity task force committee report hasn't been released to university or at least deans, chairs, etc.?
Actually, no formal reason. I see if that's something people are interested in seeing, I'm happy to release it. There's nothing confidential there. I actually kind of assumed it had already been out and about because there were so many people on the university campus that were involved with it. But happy to release absolutely nothing confidential there. The one thing that I'm working on right now is how do we move forward as a positive ways. We haven't necessarily mapped that out yet, although I had a conversation with the two co-chairs 2 weeks ago, I think. And so we started thinking about what next steps might be on that, but there's nothing confidential there. So I'll think about the best way to get that information out. And some really, really good stuff there. They did a really good job on the research side of it. I was really impressed with the amount of work they did to collect data to really make their case. But I don't think it was just making their case. I think they developed their case based on the research. And it was really, really well done. So happy to Matt, I'll give some thought on the best way to share that, but nothing confidential there. Happy to share that information.
This question prompted the question about the Huron report and about sharing it.
Yeah.
But then there is a public chat question in terms of partnering with the Peoria area. What are we doing now?
Yeah.
To let parents, students know it's safe and a great place to go to college. And then the person comments, they know they've heard concerns along those lines from prospective students. So,
yeah, let me talk about the safety one for just a minute. This one is interesting to me, and one of the things that I'm learning, I'm still adjusting to this, is unlike other environments and where I've worked, whatever we say and do, if I send out an email, I feel increasingly confident I should just send it directly to the Journal-Star. Because there's a really good chance it's going to show up in the paper in a day or two anyway. And that's new to me. That's different. A lot of the environments in which I've operated, the universities were, trying to get the media to pay attention to them. Here, we get a lot of attention. And there was some pretty high profile attention on some safety issues on campus. So I did a fair amount of research before I came here. And there's something called the Clery Act, which actually requires us to publish data on our safety performance. Look, every campus, every community has their safety issues, right? This is not unique to us. And in fact, our statistics are better than a lot of the comparative schools I was looking at. Our public persona would not tell you that. And so I think there's some opportunities for us. Clearly safety, it's interesting. I'd heard this from several presidential colleagues before, and boy, I've really felt it a lot myself, that the health and well-being and safety of our students, faculty, and staff, it's the stuff that keeps you up at night. And boy, if that wasn't normally the case during COVID-19, it's absolutely been the case. So it's something that every president that I know of with a soul, which is most of them, by the way, actually worries about extensively, right? It's the kind of thing that keeps us up at night. But we do a pretty good job of it here. And I don't think the world I think the perception on that is perhaps a bit off. And I've heard folks talk about, well, there are some really not so great parts of town, not that far away. I can name a dozen universities that are in the exact same situation, and whether it's Wharton or USC or Butler, I mean, the list goes on and on and on of schools that often find themselves, for whatever reason, in somewhat challenged environments. We do a really good job of navigating that. And that's a story I want to start telling a little bit different, a little bit better. Doesn't mean we don't need to continue to be diligent on the safety and well-being. That it is and will continue to be a huge priority for us. But it's interesting that it gets perhaps the attention it does relative to what the data would suggest. And so that's something that I think, it goes back to the earlier question around, is Peoria a liability or a strength for us? This is our home. This is our community. There's a lot of really great things about, I'm a relative newbie to Peoria. We love it here. It's a really good community in a lot of good ways. It's a great place to come and be a student. And I don't think that's always the story that's told. And so that's something that I think is an opportunity for us to flip the script a little bit, if you will. Not being disingenuous about the data. The data is clear and we know what it is and we know what we need to pay attention to, but I think there are some really strong opportunities to change that story a little bit. please, I got a couple people ready to make comments on that, which I appreciate. So,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Michelle.
I was just going to say that I think that this points to a missed opportunity. We don't emphasize the positive aspects of Peoria. Part of it, I think, comes from advertising as a suburban campus, which I understand because we're not a major city. But that might be one of the reasons why the statistics make it seem worse than comparable schools. But more so on the positive aspects, there's outdoor recreation, there's an art scene, there's a music scene, and
Right.
it is a small enough city that is all very accessible. There's a theater scene it's accessible to students who want to get involved. And I don't think that gets emphasized much, especially to prospective students.
It's very interesting. By the way, the park system here is one of the best I think I've ever seen. And that's, by the way, the individual behind a lot of that is a lady named Lydia Moss Bradley. My girls and I spend a lot of time in Detweiler Park. For those of you that might be familiar with that, we love it. We go hiking there a lot, which is one of the things you can do in a COVID-19 environment. You can actually, so even in bad weather, we'll go out and go hiking in the woods. And for a city of this size to have as much it has in the way of a park system is pretty remarkable, actually. So I think there are really some great strengths. Rachel, you were going to share something as well.
Yeah, I was going to say in some of those bad neighborhoods is where some of our students are most actively involved and safe doing so. So in Family and Consumer Sciences, we have students who help at the farmers market and community gardens and local nonprofits, school systems. And I don't know if they get a lot of attention about that we're operating very safely in these areas and helping the community. I don't know if community partners get a voice in talking about, working with Bradley students. I also don't know, parents and prospective students get off the highway and then come right to the campus. They don't really have time to explore Peoria, or maybe, I don't know if some sort of guide is given to them about Peoria and the history or anything like that. I have no idea.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I also agree that I feel like one of the strengths we offer is the size of the community and the kinds of learning spaces where students can be so active, because you do have this kind, I mean, I work in education, but there's this kind of urban core, close suburban band, rural schools, all within this really short frame. And I think part of the challenge is we have some students who come to Bradley, this is the most urban environment they've ever been in. For some of them, it's the most rural environment, right? So,
Yeah.
For the fact that we can drive 10 minutes and there's fields, I've had, my students from Chicago kind of like, oh my gosh, so I think it's a really neat place to live and work and learn. And I do think we need to play it up better than we do, because I think students are able to get very involved with our local organizations, start businesses. And so I think we need to make more of that.
It's interesting. One of the things that you all are suggesting, which makes sense to me, is there's stuff here, and because of our size, it's more accessible than it is perhaps in some of the big cities. And it is interesting. I have figured out you don't have to drive far to hit farmland. So it's, but on that note, I'm fascinated by the fact that there are not many USDA research sites left in the world, right? And there's one literally across the river from us, across the road from us. And my wife's originally from Hong Kong, grew up in Portland, Oregon. And I remember when we first drove in, and the skyline over the river is beautiful, actually. And the river is a major asset for us as well. That if you've come from a landlocked part of the country, the river is quite a resource. So kind of a punchline and all that, the city can be an asset. We just have to be thoughtful about how we talk about it as an asset. And I think Ed is a real opportunity for us. So we've lost Matt. He had to run off to class. I have I mean, I have another meeting in 5 minutes. One of the blessings and curses of our current environment is I've got a long commute to, 2 clicks away to my next meeting. So as is typical, we can do back to back to back to back to back meetings, which I have all afternoon. So I'm gonna have to jump off in just a minute. The one thing I will say is I thoroughly enjoy these kind of dialogues. One of the real tensions for me about our current environment is I'm a wander the campus and meet people kind of person normally. It doesn't really work well in today's environment. So this is an opportunity for us to engage in a little bit of a dialogue. If you start processing this, you have more questions, you have more comments. If you're comfortable, you can reach out to me directly. I would enjoy that. I would value that. If for whatever reason you're uncomfortable doing so, Matt is great about giving me information, sharing information with me, but in a way that doesn't attribute it to individuals. So please feel comfortable doing that as well. He is a really good representative of the faculty and staff on campus. He does that really, really well. Chris, anything you want to add before we close out?
I don't think so, but I will talk to Matt about some Friday sessions to maybe accomplish some of the suggestions that people made. We'll work on that in the coming week or two.
Great. All right, I am going to jump off so that I have a couple minute break before I run into my next meeting, but thank you all for participating. I really appreciate you doing so, and looking forward to continuing the dialogue. And you all are welcome to stay online and continue to chat if you're interested and have time. I unfortunately need to jump off to another meeting, but again, thank you for participating. I really appreciate you all doing so.
And I see your note, Jen. We'll see if we can vary the schedule.
Great. Thank you, everyone.